Palermo, late 70s. The air was tense, the streets dangerous, and everyone knew when to keep their head down. Everyone except Letizia Battaglia. She wasn't a cop or a politician, she was a photojournalist. But her photos hit so hard, they rattled the highest levels of power in Italy. And when a letter landed on her desk telling her to leave the city immediately, she crumpled it up and went back to work. This is the story of how one lens stared down an empire of fear, and why her pictures still matter decades later. Letizia Battaglia was born in Palermo in 1935 and died there in 2022. In between, she turned a camera into a weapon, not to harm, but to expose. Her early life was strict. At 16, she married just to escape a suffocating home. 3 daughters later, she walked away from that life, moved to Milan and started over. Those years gave her grit and a sharp sense of when someone was trying to control her. She didn't even set out to be a photographer. She wanted to write. In 1969, she landed a job at Palermo's left-leaning paper, L'Ora. The editors told her they needed photos to go with her articles. She picked up a camera, not knowing it would become the thing that she was remembered for. A few years in Milan sharpened her skills and brought her a partner in life and work, photographer Franco Zecchini. In 1974, she came back to Palermo as head of L'Ora's photo department. Perfect timing for a storm she couldn't have imagined. Sicily in the late 70s and 80s was a pressure cooker. Cosa Nostra families were fighting for control and violence was a constant undercurrent. Letizia was on the front lines with her camera. She raced from one scene to the next, often covering several incidents in a single day. Her photos ripped away the Hollywood gloss. Instead of stylized gangsters, you saw grief, fear, and the raw aftermath of power struggles spilling into public life. If you're thinking, alright, but how does this still matter today? Wait until you hear about the one forgotten photo that ended up in a courtroom and shook the political elite. Letizia's style was wide, close and fast. She used a wide-angle lens that made you feel like you were standing right there. Heavy shadows, bursts of light, and expressions frozen mid-emotion. But she wasn't chasing shock value. She called her work emotionally brutal because she cared about the people she was photographing. She knew she was walking a fine line between close enough to capture the truth without turning it into a spectacle. That's why, alongside tense street moments, you'll find images of kids playing ball, couples clinging to each other, women smoking outside their homes. She wanted the world to see that life kept going in Palermo, even under pressure. And the courage? She got real threats. She refused bodyguards because she wanted the people behind those threats to see that she wasn't afraid. Every day she still showed up with her camera. Some of her most famous shots: the arrest of Leoluca Bagarella, one of the most feared men in Sicily, caught and led away. Desperation of a son, not the loss itself, but the collapse of a man in the moment he learns about it. Rosaria Schifani at her husband's funeral, a portrait of grief that became a national symbol of quiet defiance. And then there's the Andreotti photo, the one frame that didn't just make headlines, it became evidence. We'll get there in a second. If stories like this interest you, stick around. Later, I'm going to show you how one single photo rattled the entire Italian government. Letizia didn't just take photos, she stepped into politics. She ran for office with the Green Party and served on Palermo's City Council from 1995 to 1991. She was part of the Palermo Spring, a movement to reclaim public spaces from criminal influence. She helped reopen beaches, clear out abandoned cars, and turn neglected spots into places families could gather again. Later, she served as a regional deputy. For her, changing the streets and changing the narrative went hand in hand. By the way, that Andreotti photo, when it finally surfaced, it shook the highest levels of Italian politics. Let's talk about that. In the early 90s, investigators found an old frame in her archive, taken at a late 70s rally. It showed Giulio Andreotti, Italy's former Prime Minister, standing next to Nino Salvo, a businessman with alleged underworld ties. Andreotti had sworn they had never met. That picture told a different story. In court, it landed like a thunderbolt. One forgotten image, suddenly with the weight to rattle an entire government. But 1992 brought personal loss that no awards could make up for. Two judges she admired, Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino, were assassinated. It was too much. She walked away from photographing violent crime. She turned to publishing, teaching, and cultural projects. But in 2020, she made headlines again, this time for a Lamborghini campaign. The photos featured young girls from Palermo, shot in her trademark style, with luxury cars blurred in the background. She wanted the girls to outshine the machines, but some critics read it differently. The backlash was instant. The brand pulled the campaign, and Letizia stood by her word. Love it or hate it, she was still sparking debate at 85. If you're into deep dives on photographers who've risked it all to tell the truth, hit subscribe, because the next story I'm doing is just as wild. Her photos weren't glossy, they were honest, even when that meant messy edges and uncomfortable truths. She often censored women and children, not as props, but as the heart of the story. She believed women deserved equal power, and said you have to take a side. Her own side was crystal clear. Her process, violently emotional. She'd go through contact seats for hours, digging for the one frame that carried the truth. She left more than 600,000 images, plus institutions like the International Center of Photography in Palermo and the Archivio Letizia Battaglia, founded in 2021. Her work still tours, people still stumble across her images and feel the same jolt that first woke Palermo up decades ago. So what's the real cost of capturing these moments? For Letizia, it meant living with fear, losing friends, and carrying those images forever. But it also meant proof that could challenge the powerful and give voice to those told to stay quiet. She picked her side. Stand with the living, remember the dead, and make the powerful uncomfortable. That's something anyone can carry, camera or not.